Hey Max, how's it going? So, yeah, so the eyes. So if you want to get that kind of similar look to what you've got here in ZBrush, where you've got this kind of reflective type of surface here. Well, first of all, you're going to have to make sure you have the right reflection image, because this is actually reflecting something, some kind of HDRI image there. And then we're going to have to play around with a bunch of things like the facing ratio and stuff like that, somewhat. So to do this, I'm just going to select everything. The eyes are really tiny, so just to kind of go through an approach, and then I'll let you adapt it as you see fit. So basically, I'm just going to create a redshift material. And I'm going to apply that to the creature here. And I'm going to open up the IPR. So let's see here. Right, so if we want to control or to get that type of effect, it is using a bit of what's called a facing ratio. So essentially, facing ratio looks at the geometry from the camera, and as the geometry angles away from camera, we can kind of change color or the amount of reflectivity or the amount of roughness and all of those different attributes. So let's go through setting that up. So I'm just going to start by creating a ramp. Oh, but not that kind of ramp. Just a ramp texture. There we go. And I'm just going to start by playing around with the color itself. Now we can have different ramps for different elements within the object. So if I were to connect this directly to color, this is kind of what we get, right? It's just going to go to our UVs, and you can see it's just kind of breaking everything up like that. But what we're going to be doing is not connecting it directly like this. We're going to be looking at connecting it using the facing ratio. So we shouldn't really have the same type of problem. So I'm going to create what's called a sampler info node, and this has been around forever. This is how we would used to create like that X-ray effect and things like that. And to get that facing ratio, it's just right here, this guy. So I'm going to hit 3 just so I can get the output. And this facing ratio is going to go into our V coordinate for the ramp. And we could plug it directly in, or we could have a little bit of color control depending on how much control we want. So if I were to create, say, a remap color, or remap value, or remap HSV, I could then connect these two guys together. And then this out color, I'm just going to put that into color. So now what we're going to get, if I were to control the ramp, yeah, so you can kind of see we're getting this kind of cool, somewhat kind of X-ray-esque kind of effect, right, over everything. Now this is kind of what we're going to do, but apply it to the eyeball to a certain degree, right? So we can get this kind of interesting cloudy effect, right? You can already see it's kind of creating this interesting thing over the eyeball. Now, what's cool with this is that it's always based off of the camera position, so it's not going to just stick there. So it's going to create like a real, somewhat cloudy-ish type of effect, which is kind of cool, right? And then it's really just a matter of playing around with color and things like that. So right now this is in color. So you know, if I wanted to create a bit of that, bit of a greenish color, like in the ZBrush shader, I could do that. And it's looking pretty cool in through here too. You know, we could just create a any color, right? So you know, if I wanted this to be more of a yellow, and I wanted to go to more of a green, It's a little bit pukey. Maybe not the best color transition choices. But you get the idea, right? So you can kind of go around and play with whatever colors that you want to kind of transition between. Maybe I want to go with a bit of a grayish green going into a bit of a darker green. Or maybe instead of like a bright green like this, just maybe more of a darker color altogether. And then we can kind of control the amount of fall off, right? And this is kind of how that ZBrush shader is working. And then, you know, these can go into any of those values. So I could go in, let's say I wanted to control things like the specular or the metallic quality of this. So I could go back into my hypershade. Go back over to my hypershade, which is right here. It's open somewhere in my interface. I wish I could pause the video at this point. Where did my hypershade go? I feel like oh, there we go. I thought this was just the attribute editor, but anyhow. So I'm just going to grab that entire network. I'm going to go edit, duplicate, shading network. So now I don't have to reset everything up again. It's already set up. And then, you know, I can control things like reflection, right? So if I were to switch this over, so, you know, I have like off and I have on. And I can also control off and on through here. So if I wanted maybe the exterior to be a little bit more reflective or the interior to be a little bit more reflective, what I can do is I could take this out color and just put it into the reflection color, right? So now we can control where that specularity lies in relation to the camera angle. So if I were to go over to my ramp, right now this is green, right? It's a green reflection, and that's fine. Maybe that's what you want. But you know, I could go between white and black. And you know, maybe I don't want the reflection on facing us. Maybe I want it more on the angled surfaces, right? Where it's kind of angling away from us. So you can see as it kind of curves around a little bit, it becomes more reflective, right? So we can kind of control the reflection that way. So we're getting some interesting results from that, right? And it doesn't have to be that intense either. And you can control things like roughness. That would be kind of an interesting thing to control, right? So if I wanted, let me just duplicate this again. So I think that was the last thing I did. So if I select these four and hit the G key, yeah, I've got them again. Here we go. So maybe I want this to go into roughness. So, you know, maybe I want it to be not quite as rough on the outside, or not quite as shiny on the outside, or not quite as shiny maybe on the inside. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put this into the roughness. So the roughness might not allow me to connect it directly. So what we need to do is go out. We just have to pick one of these. So with roughness, we can't use color, obviously. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose one of my color channels. And I'm going to put it into roughness, reflection roughness right here. There we go. Right, so now what I can do is I can control things like, so the darker it is, the more specular it is, right? So if I want it shinier on this side, or, you know, maybe I want it shinier on the outer portion and maybe a little bit more matte on the inside. So we can get some interesting transitions over the surface with how we control that roughness facing camera. All right, but it is something you have to experiment with, and just to get the exact colors you need. And you know, I would just treat that. You can do the same thing with refractions, right? If you want a bit more transparent center where the pupil is, you can kind of do the same thing for that. I'm going to end the video here, and I'll let you kind of experiment, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. Okay, cheers.